There's a house in England so infamous they call it the House of Horrors. Behind its doors, a smiling husband and wife murdered at least 12 people, most of them young women, and hid their bodies under floors, in gardens, and even inside the walls. To their neighbors, Fred and Rose West were just another working-class couple raising kids in a normal home. But inside, it was a prison, a torture chamber, and a graveyard all at once. The victims, some were strangers, some were family, and the way they lured, controlled, and disposed of them is so twisted, it makes even seasoned detectives sick. Tonight, I'm going to take you inside that house room by room and show you exactly how two ordinary-looking people became Britain's most sadistic killers. It stood on a busy street in Gloucester, England, 25 Cromwell Street. From the outside, it was just another modest terraced house, its white-painted walls and narrow windows blending seamlessly into the row of similar homes. People walked past it every day without a second thought. To the neighbors, it was a place where kids played in the front yard, where Fred West fixed cars in the driveway, where Rose West hung laundry on the line. But behind that ordinary facade was a darkness so deep that it would one day horrify the nation. The house was cramped but functional. A narrow hallway leading to a small front room, a kitchen at the back, and a steep staircase climbing to the bedrooms above. But the real secrets were hidden beneath the floorboards, behind bricked-up walls, and in the back garden. Fred and Rose had carefully crafted their home into a place where victims could be held, abused, and eventually killed without anyone outside suspecting a thing. The basement, in particular, became their private chamber of horrors, soundproofed, dimly lit, and filled with the tools of their sadistic trade. No screams escaped those walls. No one saw the violence that took place there, and those who entered rarely left alive. For years, the Wests lived like this, carrying out their daily routines in public while committing unspeakable acts in private. The bodies of their victims were hidden in shallow graves within the property, some dismembered, others bound in ways that spoke of prolonged suffering before death. Children grew up in that house. Meals were eaten, holidays celebrated, all while the remains of young women lay buried just feet away. It would take decades before the truth emerged. Decades before police would dig up the floors and garden, unearthing the evidence that turned 25 Cromwell Street from just another address into a crime scene that would haunt Britain forever. Fred West's childhood began in 1941 in the quiet village of Muchmarcle, Herefordshire. Life on the farm was tough, with long days of work and strict discipline. His family kept to themselves, and the West household often felt closed off from the rest of the community. Fred learned early to rely on charm to get what he wanted, but that charm often came with manipulation. By his teenage years, he had developed a reputation for having a quick temper and little regard for rules. An accident at 17 left him with a serious head injury. Those who knew him said he changed after that, more unpredictable, more impulsive. His fascination with control and bending situations to his will became a defining part of his personality. Rosemary Letts was born in 1953 in Devon. Her upbringing was marked by instability. Her father's unpredictable behavior kept the household tense, and her mother struggled with health issues that often left Rose feeling adrift. As a child, she grew withdrawn, preferring to watch people closely and figure out their weaknesses. By her early teens, Rose had a temper that could ignite without warning. She could be caring one moment and cold the next, a trait that unsettled those around her. She learned quickly that gaining someone's trust made it easier to influence them. Two very different lives, two very different paths, but both shaped by environments that blurred the lines between care and control. And when Fred and Rose's paths finally crossed, it would not be chance that kept them together. It would be recognition, one predator seeing another. It was 1969 when Fred West first met Rosemary Letts. Fred was 27, already a convicted thief with a history of violence. Rose was just 15, working part-time at a bakery, shy at first glance but with a simmering volatility beneath the surface. Their meeting seemed ordinary enough. Fred spotted her at a bus stop in Cheltenham, instantly drawn to her youthful looks and the innocence he believed he could corrupt. Rose, in turn, was intrigued by the older man's confidence and charm, and perhaps sensed the darkness that mirrored her own. Fred pursued her quickly. He would wait for her after work, offer rides, and shower her with attention. At first, Rose's parents disapproved of the relationship, sensing something dangerous in Fred. But Fred was relentless, and his charm worked its poison. Soon, Rose was visiting him at the caravan where he lived, and eventually she moved in. Once together, their shared appetite for control and cruelty began to surface. Rose, despite her age, adapted easily to Fred's dominance, and soon began participating in his sexual abuse of young women. The couple's bond was not built on love, but on shared depravity. In 1970, Fred was imprisoned for theft, and during his time away, Rose began caring for his 2 children from a previous relationship. But rather than protecting them, she subjected them to physical and sexual abuse. It was the clearest sign yet that the young girl Fred had met at the bus stop was just as dangerous as he was. When Fred was released, they reunited without hesitation, their relationship now solidified by a shared secret. They both enjoyed the suffering of others. It wasn't long before they began seeking victims together, and 25 Cromwell Street would become the final stop for many of those unfortunate enough to cross their path. By the mid-1970s, 25 Cromwell Street had taken on a second identity. To the outside world, it was a busy family home with the noise of children, the smell of dinners cooking, and the sound of Fred's tools clattering in the yard. But inside, it was a place of no return for those who crossed its threshold. Fred and Rose became skilled at spotting vulnerability. Young women traveling alone, runaways, or those in difficult situations. People who wouldn't be immediately missed. Sometimes they lured them in with the promise of a place to stay or a meal. Other times, they targeted women already known to them through work or social connections. Once inside the house, the atmosphere shifted. Behind closed doors, the same charm that drew victims in was replaced by control and intimidation. The rooms upstairs and the basement were places where the outside world could not hear you, where time seemed to slow and fear became constant. Some of the victims were last seen laughing, smiling, or chatting with neighbors. Others seemed quieter, as though they already sensed something was wrong. Either way, once the door closed, their chances of leaving grew smaller with each passing hour. For those who disappeared, friends and family were often told a version of events that painted them as having moved away, found new work, or simply decided to cut ties. Fred and Rose knew how to make a lie sound believable, and the lack of immediate evidence kept suspicion away for years. In the garden and under the floors, the truth was buried, layer by layer, hidden beneath soil, concrete, and years of ordinary life. Meals were eaten just feet above where the remains of victims lay. Children played in the yard, never realizing what was beneath their feet. It was a home that functioned like a stage set, bright enough on the outside to fool an audience, but with horrors waiting just behind the curtain. And as the years passed, the list of names associated with that address would only grow. For years, Fred and Rose West lived behind the mask of normality, their home at 25 Cromwell Street blending into the row of terraced houses like any other. But by the early 1990s, cracks in that mask had begun to show. Whispers started with the neighbors. Some spoke about young women who came to the house but were never seen again. Others recalled strange noises late at night or the odd hours Fred kept in the garden, digging and covering patches of soil without explanation. The first serious breakthrough came when police began investigating the disappearance of a teenage girl connected to the Wests. Their inquiries revealed other names, women who had vanished without a trace, some of them last known to have been in Fred and Rose's company. When officers first knocked on the West's door, Fred's charm was in full display. He smiled, invited them in, and acted as though the questions were nothing more than a misunderstanding. Rose was quieter, keeping to the background, but detectives noticed the way she avoided eye contact and the tension in her movements. Search warrants soon followed. At first, the police were looking for signs of a single missing person. But as they combed through the property, small discoveries hinted at something far darker. A suspicious patch of disturbed ground in the garden. The faint, unmistakable smell of decay. Places in the home where walls had been rebuilt with unusual thickness. On a cold February day in 1994, police began digging in the garden. Within hours, the first set of remains was uncovered. Fred tried to brush it off as an accident from years ago, but as the days passed, more remains surfaced. The truth could no longer be hidden. Fred West was arrested soon after, with Rose following days later. What began as an inquiry into one missing girl had turned into the unearthing of one of the most horrifying series of murders in British history. The quiet terraced house on Cromwell Street was no longer just another address. It was now the most infamous crime scene in the country. When the police finished their excavation of 25 Cromwell Street, the scale of what they had uncovered was staggering. In total, the remains of at least 12 victims were found, though investigators suspected there could be more. Each discovery peeled away another layer of the West's carefully maintained facade, revealing the true nature of the couple who had lived among neighbors, raised children, and smiled at passers-by. Fred West, confronted with mounting evidence, initially cooperated with investigators, even leading them to burial sites. But as the gravity of the charges grew, his demeanor changed. In January 1995, before his trial could begin, Fred was found dead in his prison cell, an escape from justice that left many of his victims' families without the closure of seeing him face a jury. Rose West, however, stood trial later that year. In a courtroom packed with reporters and grieving families, the prosecution laid out the full horror of her role in the murders. Witnesses described a woman who was as calculating as she was cruel, capable of switching from warmth to violence in an instant. After a lengthy and harrowing trial, Rose West was found guilty of 10 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She remains incarcerated to this day, a symbol of calculated evil hiding in plain sight. 25 Cromwell Street did not survive the case. In 1996, the house was demolished, the ground cleared to ensure it could never become a morbid tourist attraction. Where the West's House of Horrors once stood, there is now only an unmarked patch of grass. A quiet space in a city that will never forget what happened there. But the story's shadow lingers. Books, documentaries, and now streaming series continue to revisit the case, each one unearthing the same unsettling truth. Evil can look ordinary. It can wave to neighbors, mend a garden fence, or hold the door open for a stranger, all while hiding the darkest of secrets. For more chilling true crime stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments.